Let's cover the basic settings needed when you're trying to get an image to a client and what you're going to need to render out. So first of all, go into Elements and just add some elements here. And we're going to use the V-Ray denoiser, and I'm going to put on a diffuse filter. I'm going to put on object ID. I'm going to put on my material ID. I'm going to put on my render ID. If you're rendering or with blades and maybe you get some errors occasionally and you want to see what's happening, you can put on DR bucket and that will show you which blade has rendered. But I'm not rendering with blades here, so I'm going to leave that off. So click OK. I'm going to add on as well 2 of this V-Ray extra text, and I usually do them at the end just so I can easily see what's happening. Bring up your material editor, come over here, go to V-Ray maps, just get a V-Ray dirt map, and I'm going to set this radius here at 100, and then I'm going to shift left click and I'm going to shift left click and drag, and then double click on this one, and I'm going to set this radius to 300. And then what we're going to do is take this first one, call this 100, put the 100 into that, and then call this one 300 and put the 300 in there. And then you need to take your object ID and you need to enable filtering on and change this to color with AA, and your material ID, put that on and do the same. And I have a script here which is going to assign IDs to everything, and I can run this, and this is Elements V-Ray, and you can get this on ScriptSpot. I actually uploaded it, so you can get that there. So this is a script I use. You can just download this from ScriptSpot. I think you need to create an account to do that, and that will give material IDs and render and object IDs to everything. And then you have this, and you click render. So then we'll go into post-production and show how to use these and what I use these for. This is the beauty render, so this is the RGB. This is what comes out. So we've got the RGB there, and then this is the alpha. I have no idea why this is there. That's definitely shouldn't be part of the alpha, but it must be set something wrong on that. But anyway, that's the alpha. I'm going to delete that. I'm not going to be using that. With skies, you might use this. If you have an exterior, it'll cut out the sky. It'll be a very hard line, but it will cut it out, so it might become useful for that. This is world positions. You don't need this. This is just part of the denoiser being generated. World normals as well. Kind of nice to look at. Here you got your refraction filter. You got your refraction RGB. You got reflection here. This is your noise level. This is your effects results. This is the result of the denoiser. If you look here, can you see these banding lines here? This will be the denoiser as opposed to the noise, which is here in this render. If you look at my render settings, the reason there's noise is because I didn't turn down the noise all the way. I left it at 0.01 and max subdivs at 24, which is default. So that's going to be creating noise. And a denoiser sometimes does a nice job. Like, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. I mean, yeah, it's got these lines, but it's done a pretty nice job on getting the noise out of the image. This is your defocus amount. I don't have that on the camera. Your background, again, it's an interior and we're not looking outside. This is the atmosphere. If you have V-Ray fog on, be awesome. Here we've got V-Ray specular. So that's nice. We can add some effects with that. This is your sample rate, showing where the noise is being generated, where it's really working hard, and you've got the anti-aliasing occurring. That's what this is showing you. Here you've got your render ID. Here you've got your reflection. Here you've got your object ID, your material ID. This is your lighting. This is your global illumination. This is your extra texture. This is what I was talking about earlier. This is the 100. That's the 300. So you can just see the difference, and you can add this in. We'll add that in comp. This is diffuse, and that's DR bucket, but I don't have distributed rendering on, so that's not showing anything. But if you did, it would show you which render node rendered which bucket. Alright, so we're just going to go over some basic ideas here and basic things to do. The first thing I normally do, now this I render in 32-bit. So you'll actually note that even though these are here, I've got a few extra ones here which I've rendered out. I made a longer list and then I didn't save it out in that max file. But I had the longer list here because I wanted to show you what these different render elements do, and I want you to get an idea of how they can be used and yeah, just how to play around in Photoshop and get the effect you want. So to start with, you can do adjustments in 32-bit, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go straight into 16-bit here. So I'm going to go Image, Mode, and here it's at 32-bit. I'm going to change that to 16-bit. And then click Don't Merge. And now all of these adjustment layers are available for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete off that alpha, and I'm going to come down. I like to delete out the layers I don't need, so I'm not sitting with all these extra layers doing things. I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to keep my finger on. I kept my finger on Shift while I'm doing that, and then I'm just going to press this little folder, and it puts everything in a folder. And I'm going to call this Help. These help me with my post production. I'm going to delete that. I don't need that. Oops. Okay. So Control Z undoes. I just deleted that, but Control Z undoes that. So we have the RGB, and normally I'm going to work with this, and I just look at the image and I go, okay, what do I not like about this image? What do we need to do? So I'm putting in the curves, and I'm going to drag this up to make it brighter. And what I love about curves is because this stays where it is, this is the whites, and this is the blacks. Remember, if this is CMYK, you have to do the reverse to get the same effect, but that's whites and that's blacks. So the black stays black and the white stays white, and it doesn't blow out the highlights. It just brings up the midtones. So we can bring that up, and you get a nice bright image, you know? Maybe I've overdone that. Let's bring that back a bit. Although on the floor, it sort of makes it look like there's no detail and stuff's been lost. Detail has been lost on the floor there, and it just sort of looks a bit washed out. Come here into my Object ID, click on that, press W, which brings over here to the wand. Just select that. Turn that off, come back to this, and I'm going to delete that mask and just click on the mask, and it will put what I have there. It's masked it. So we're just going to press Control I, and that will invert the selection. And now everything's brighter but the floor. Now I do want some brightness on the floor, so I'm just going to double click here on this. So I'm going to click here on this, double click on this one, and then just bring this over here over to the side. And then I'm going to click here on the mask, and this changes to the mask. And this density, you can see if I bring this down, it makes it so the mask is less dense. You see how the mask here looks grey and not black. So you can just affect how much of that mask has an effect on the image, and bring that up slightly. Now the other thing which I like to do is again use another curves, and just to increase contrast I'm just going to drag this up a little and drag this down a little. And what we're doing is we're pushing the lights up a little bit, not the whites but the lights, and the darks down a little. And with doing that we're just going to try and disable that mask. No, I like it on. I think maybe a little bit less dense so we get a bit more light coming in. Alright. Now at this stage it would make sense to look through these, see what you've created and see what you want to use, and just put those together and then have another look at the image. Okay, that's your refraction filter, that's your refraction RGB, that's your reflection. Now this is, it's possible you can try like turn this on and maybe change this to screen, and what it will do is it's going to make everything there bright, you see? So anything in here which is bright is going to become bright on top of the image. It'll only do the lights. So you can try that. I mean, obviously, normally, like you see here, is it's just over, it's too much. And when I do it, what I'll do is I'll normally leave this, sorry, turn it on, put that back to normal. I'll normally go, okay, I want to use this, and I'll press Alt, and I'll click here, and I'll drag it down here. And what that does is it gives me a copy. So, this one here stays where it is, and if I need to use it again for something else, I can do that, because this I might be masking out or using partly and then want to use it again. So normally that's too much, but you can just tone that down, and it just increases, all your glossy highlights just increase. So that's looking nice. That's your noise level. I do not need that. I'm going to delete that off. I'm going to go with this, even though this is noisy. The denoise one, so it gets rid of all these wrinkles and details, and I like those wrinkles in. I like those details in, and I could lower the noise threshold, and if this was for production, for a client, I probably would lower the noise threshold. It depends on how much time I have getting the render over to them. But this rendered out on my PC at home, which has like 4 cores in 3 or 4 hours. So that's why I left the noise and everything else where it was. And here we've got specular. So we can use that again, and we can try that again with screen. So I'm going to press Alt, Control Z, Alt, click and drag that down. Turn this one off, and just make sure this isn't stuck in this folder of help. So just, if needed, just bring it down till you see that blue line there, and then that'll pop out of that folder. And then change this to lighten. Just go through these. All of these just bring in the lights. These bring in the lights, and these bring in the darks. So we're going to put that on lighten, and then just maybe, go to lighten, and then go down. Screen, color dodge, linear dodge add, lighter color. See if that makes any difference. Sometimes it doesn't. No. So all of these do something, and sometimes I'll drag this back, dial this back to like 50%, and you can get a better idea of, it's more workable, and you can see the effect it's having. You can see these cushions here brighten up as you go through this, and you might like that effect. You might go, yeah, actually I like that. There's just a little bit of something else in the room. So I'm probably gonna just leave that at screen and put it down to 20. I don't always do this. Depends how I feel. Alright, so that was your specular. You got your sample rate, which shows where your anti-aliasing is working overtime. You got your render ID, and the thing with your render ID is, see, this is jagged, so you're going to sit here selecting it, and you've got to then work on that, which you can do. You can work on that mask, but this object ID, if I press Control D, you see that isn't so jagged. This is blending these together, and so you can get a better idea with the object ID and with the material ID than you can with the V-Ray render ID. But with these, you have to make sure in here, when you select them, you enable filtering and you change this output type. By default, it's an integer, no AA, and you want to change that to color with AA. So you can do that with both of those. Unfortunately, with render ID, it doesn't have that color with AA, so you can't do it with that one. But these you can. I rarely use render ID now. I normally always using material and object ID, but it's worth still having it there, I think, just in case the need comes up and it gives me some sort of detail which I'm missing from the others. So this is your lighting, and this is your GI. And this makes sense, right? And I think these are interesting to look at together. So this is your GI that's coming into the room, and that's your lighting. And if you want to, you can select these and drag these down, and you can turn on your GI, for instance, and maybe set that to lighten or screen, or just go through and see. Lighter color. It's not doing anything. Just drag those out. They got stuck in there as well. Let's try lighten, try screen. Drop this down to 20%. You can just use this to add in some more GI if you like. I'm gonna leave it off. And the lighting again, you can set that down to lighten or screen, and then you can drop this down to 30 or something. And you just increases the lights that you have. So if needed, if you want to, you can do that. I'm not in this case. But the point is you need to know what the possibilities are. Sometimes I always use diffuse, and I use this because sometimes I get blowouts. Like, let's say here, it's completely blown out and I can't see it. I can see with the diffuse, the details are there. Obviously the shadows are missing and the lighting and everything else, but the details are there. So I could come in here. I'm not going to use material ID because all this stuff's blue. So let's try object ID, and I can come in here and I can select this, and I'm going to select this one. And you know, if you want to, see up here has been selected, so I'm going to have to deselect that. So press Ctrl Z and just click on contiguous. Then it will only select what you see there in the image. So let's use this diffuse filter. Actually, make a copy of that, isn't it? That needs to go back in there. And we'll turn this on, and we're just going to put that in there. And let's try. So this is the lights, this is the darks, and this is a mix of light and dark. So I'm expecting it to still be blown out with most of these. There we go, pin light. So it's still blowing out. What I'll often do is I'll take this, which is the existing image, and I'll come here, I'll press Shift, Control, Alt, and E. And that makes a copy of the image, a duplicate of where I've gotten to so far. And I'll put that above, and I'll turn that off, and I'll put the same mask on it. So to put the same mask on, I press Alt, and then I left click and drag it up there. And I'll turn this one on. And maybe what I do is I go, let's leave this one at normal. Just so it's got all that detail in. And then I'm going to put this one on. And I might put this one and try darken or multiply. There we go. And so you can see I get the same detail, but it's less blown out. Now maybe that's too much, and I take this and I can dial this back a bit. Or, even better, what I'll do is I'll take this one. I want to put another mask on top, but you can't put another mask on top. So you press Shift and click Group, and then it puts that into the group. Then I'm going to click on here to get another mask on, and then I'm going to press B for Brush, and you see that's gone over to Brush. And I've got a brush I was using for something else. So I'm going to come here, and I want to bring the brush up from here. I'm just going to change this to painting. And brush settings, and I'm just going to go to the default brush. And I'm going to go back to photography because I like photography. Okay, and then if you press Control and Alt and then right click, you can make your brush wider if you go left and right, and if you go up and down you can get softer and harder. So I want something like this, and I want it soft, and I'm going to change the opacity here to 30%. And I'm going to press X. I mean, see, look over, if you look over here, this means the brush is white. So if I draw here, nothing's going to happen. I want to be masking it out. So I'm going to press, you can either click here, or you can press X. Either one flips it over. And then with it black, you can just paint on here a bit. And pressing Control Z, because I don't really like that. I'm going to press Control Alt Z and go through this a couple times. And I'm going to take this from 30 and drop it down to 20. And then just brush this out. In fact, I don't like that at all. So what I'm going to do, just delete that mask, delete that group. I'm going to say delete the group only. I'm going to press Control J on this guy. And then what I'm going to do is take this from multiply, and I'm going to make it brighter. So I'm going to put it on screen. And then what I'm going to do is just double click over here and just say on this layer, I only want the very whites coming through. So let's bring up the darks, say no, and you see immediately you can see what's happening. I'm just going to bring those darks up. What we'll do is we'll bring that up to there, we'll bring that to there, and then we'll say OK, and you can see that's bringing a lot of brightness back in, and then we'll just dial this back on the opacity. And we still get the brightness coming in, but not as harsh. So that's just to show you a kind of workflow that can be done. Now it's still slightly blown out, so you know, if I turn it off, it's not blown out at all. So you can just keep dialing that back if you like, until it's not blown out. But I kind of don't really mind it being blown out a little. I was just using this to show you the kind of workflow I do when I'm addressing an exact situation that I want to handle. So I look at it and you just figure it out, and that's how I use the diffuse filter. So with these extra textures, if you take a look, we've got the 300 and we've got the 100. And I'm going to take the 100, I think. And I always note that some things have come out black. And the reason they come out black is because the faces have been flipped. And some come out dark because it's, you know, it's V-Ray dirt and it's close to other items. Like here it's dark, up here, around the computer, just because everything's close. So, you know, just take note of these and you can brush these out. And the best way to do this is use something like an exposure, and then turn it on, click on it, press Control A. That's just marks all of it. You see this dotted line around the outside here, and then Control C copies it. You can turn this off. Press Alt and click on exposure, Control V, and that brings this into the exposure, and then press Control I, and that will invert it. And then you've still got this sort of line around the edge, so press Control D to deselect. Then you're going to click here on the exposure, and here basically, you know, if you can go gamma or exposure, whichever one you think looks better, but basically, you know, you push this up and you can see the mask is having an effect, it's doing something, it's making it brighter or darker. And you can go to exposure route as well if you like. But I'm going to use the gamma. I'm just going to push this up, and I'll use the AO, but I'll only use it a bit. And I might use it in certain areas more than others. So I might come back and look at it here again and say, I really like it on the floor. And you can hardly see it on the floor. So I press Control J to make a copy of this. And then I come up here, up to the object ID, just click on that, press W, click on this. And then I want to invert it, so I'm going to press Control, Alt, and I to invert the selection. And then I'm going to press Alt and click here on this mask. And then I'm going to press X to invert these, and I'm going to press Delete. And what Delete will do is it will make that color basically happen in the selected area. And then press Control D. So now it's only affecting the floor. Come back here. And you still can't see it, so I can click this and I can yank this up until you can start seeing it. And then you can see the difference. And again, you might say, well, it's a bit too dark under there, so I'm going to press Shift and click here on the folder. And I like to actually name these. You wouldn't believe it, would you? Because I haven't named anything so far. So I like to name these. So here for the first one, I can just call it Brighton. The reason I like to name them is so I know what's happening when I come back later. And someone else can know what's happening when they come back later. And if, you know, if I work in a team, someone else looks at it and opens up, they can see what's been done and know what it does. Otherwise, they're just having to look at the image and guess. So here, we're going to call it reflection more. And this one we're going to call, sometimes I keep these names on so someone can see it, specular. More. And then I'm just going to take these. I'm going to take these three. Just press Shift, select the first one, press Shift, select the bottom one, keep your finger on Shift, press for the folder, double click on there, and call that bed covers. I'm going to turn on this one, and just double click here and call it AO, that's for ambient occlusion, and this one can be AO floor. And I'm going to bring this down a bit, I don't really like it that much. It's more to show you and to give you an idea. And then here, we're going to put a mask here and press B for brush. And, you know, if it's white, you can just swap it over and then brush that out there and under these four legs. And I'm going to change this opacity up to 100%. And I'm just going to brush these out there. And you can see here what's happening. And you can press, if you press /, the one just next to your shift button, then you can see what's happening, what this mask's doing, and you see it comes up with red. So we can turn it off and on. Just have a look. Alright, that's fine. And this was the original AO. And it just sort of grounds everything a bit more and gives everything a bit more oomph. And so generally that's sort of the way I go, and then I have a look at it and I go, well, what do I want? And I think, well, this is dark and I want to brighten this up, and you can see these grays up here. I'm not happy with this, so I would probably re-render this, but this would be handled in the render settings. And the way I would handle that, if necessary, I mean, here I've got GI, light cache, and brute force, and this is what's causing it. So light cache is set to 2000. That's not cool. But that's still causing it. So if you want to get rid of it completely, just make it brute force, and they will disappear. Otherwise, you have to increase the lighting, because the first render, right? The original render, like something like this, and it's quite dark, and that's why you're getting that up there. It's because the lights isn't reaching all of the little corners, and the photons aren't being calculated properly. So we're getting this darkness. And then as we brighten it, it becomes more and more obvious. So the solution is you do brute force, or you make it so the render just isn't as dark. You just increase the light and get more light happening in this before you click render. Okay, so now we've got this. We've got it nice and bright. What I'm going to do, I learned this from Serge Ramelli. If you look at him on YouTube, he's got a ton of stuff to do with Lightroom. And I learned this from one of his tutorials. I'm just brightening this up, and basically you just press B, you get your brush going, and press X just so you have white at the top, so you're painting with white. And you can take the hardness down a bit, and you just go, okay, I want some light back here. I want something interesting going on. So you just kind of draw in, make it a bit smaller, make it less hard. Oh, that's the maximum level. I'm going to change this back down to 30, just so it doesn't have such an impact. And let's take the flow down to 32. And I'm going to just paint in certain areas here. And you can paint in brighter areas where it's bright, if you like. And all we're doing is we're trying to create some interest. We're trying to get some contrast, some variation happening. And so that's the purpose of this. And I'll use this various times. I'm just painting over here to make it brighter. And Control Z, undo that. I don't like that really. And I'll come out to have a look and see how it looks, and just lighten up back there a little bit more. And then what I'll do, if you look, that's the mask, right? It's just been randomly painted on, but the difference is from that to that. And what I'll do again is I'll put another curves and I'll make it darker, and then I'll invert that, and then I'll paint through and I'll make certain areas darker. And as opposed to just doing normal contrast here, what I'm doing is creating contrast in those areas that I want. So I want that back of that to be darker, and under here, and under this bedside down here, and table, maybe that lamp. And maybe I do want a bit of darkness there and across the top. And then maybe just catching in here, I'm just painting in a bit there on the edge. So now you can see, like, if I turn these off, you can get a kind of, just a more dramatic effect. And I'll use these all the time, and I do tell people in the office to use them, but I probably don't use it as much as they could. But I think that's a better image. And that just creates this extra layer of interest. So I love that. Now, the other thing which you can do, I'm going to press Shift, Control, Alt, and E, and that'll make a copy of it here. I'm going to right click on this, and I'm going to say Convert to Smart Object. I'm going to call this Final Comp. And the reason I convert this to a smart object is so it keeps all the details on the further changes which I do. Now what I've done is I have downloaded the Nick collection. And this is free now. You can find this on the internet. if you Google download Nick collection, you can download the whole thing for free. It used to be like £500 or something, but now they've stopped doing it anymore and it's just available. So click Color Effects Pro 4, and then this gives you a whole bunch of details. You can come here and go Brilliance Warmth. You can click on these and you can see different things that you can do, different effects you can create. And these are awesome. These are really nice filters. And you can choose some of these and you can work on it, and this is on the architecture one where you can look at the different ones that are possible and which exist. Put a vignette on if you like, work on the contrast. Some of it you'll be wondering what's going on, like this Brilliance Warmth. If you come over here, so you can adjust this here, so you've got these sliders. So you have to look at these sliders and what you want to do, and you can add in control points and have it so it just works in certain areas, but these are pretty awesome. And then, so let's say you get this, you know, and you could turn it on and off, and it makes a very subtle change. So let's say the way I would use this is I'd come along and I'd just go through what's that doing? Do I like it? Not really. You can just play with these. Maybe I want to keep that. So I keep that and I click on here, add filter. And this adds in another one. So now I can come along and just click on all. So I can do something like that. And here you've got different types of soft focus. So let's go for 3. And then you've got a strength. This is like that awful stuff they used to do in the 80s for Jane Fonda's workout. And just see again. It just makes a slight effect, right? And then add another filter. And you basically just come in here and you look for something which you like. And maybe you go, oh yeah, vignette filter or vignette blur or vignette lens. Maybe you go, you like this, And then you can adjust the size, adjust the transition. Change down the opacity. And add one. The vignette's just so subtle on the edge. And here, normally what I'll try and do at this stage is I want to kind of make it a little bit warm. Because, after all, warmth is when a client looks at an image, they're trying to sell it normally. So, even though we can do all this lovely stuff, you really need to have it, at the end of the day, it needs to be nice and communicating and creating the image which the client is after and looking for. So that warms it up nicely, and we can reduce the strength. And it just, for me, that warms it up. You're going to be like, what? That's hardly visible. But if you look at the walls are going from blue to orange. And if I turn it on too much, it just looks horrible. So I'll come down low and do something like this. And then you click OK. And then turn it on and off. And normally that's what I have, I have a slight change. Now I'm going to press Ctrl J, make a copy of it. And I'm going to come here and I'm going to double click on this Color Effects 4 just to reopen this. And I'm going to delete these out and go back to having one. And what I want to do with this one is really find one I like, but which is too strong. And then we'll just use Photoshop to handle that. Let's see here. This is something I would do. I'd take this, and I don't want to add in more grain per pixel. Okay, I don't want grain added in. I'll take something like this. And I'll say okay. And then what I'll do is just lower this down to about 10% opacity. And play around with this and push it up a bit. And then maybe bring this from normal. Maybe just try different blending modes here for this and just see, maybe there's one which you really like. In this case, I'm just going to put it in normal and have the opacity down low. And I like that. That creates a nice look for me, Maybe for your client you want to turn it off. But I love it. So that's generally my thoughts with post-production. Is the main one is very simply, what are you trying to achieve? What do you want to do? What do you think looks wrong with the image? So I'm just going to press Alt and show you this is the image we started with. And immediately I look at this image, I go, I love it, but it's too dark. And then the sunlight hitting the floor isn't bright enough. And, I could go on with various other bits and pieces. So, we've just gradually adjusted things and brought it together. And then in the end, we've just used this Nikon collection to add in some extra changes and make it so, it really pops and comes together nicely. And that's generally my post-production workflow.